The Dunning Africa Center. It's not a place, it's a continent-wide conversation.
We shift our focus to the central theme of this month's webinar. Our distinguished panelists and hosts are drawn from across the world and work in business, academia, and government. Join us as we ask the pressing questions facing African business today.
Everyone, welcome to yet another Dunning Africa Center webinar. And today we have with us a distinguished set of panelists, and we're moving on to a topic which has not been studied as much as it should be, and that is the creative sector. Creative sector is really important to us. In Africa, it's a fundamentally important aspect of every society, in every culture. Everyone kind of consumes this product. It's a universal product. Nobody can live without it, and it comes in different forms. We at Henley Business School find this subject, of course, really interesting. We even have a executive program in this area, and one of, in fact, my co-host today is Barry van Zyl, who in fact leads this effort to engage with the creative industry, being something of a renowned artist and producer of content himself. Barry has a long CV, and I'm not going to go into reading out the whole thing, but where there's music, there's Barry, and well-known musician, 30 years experience, performance production, you name it. He has toured globally with, I think, with the Johnny Clegg Band, and he's worked with people like Annie Lennox and Ladysmith Black Mambazo. He's everywhere. So I'm going to let him say a few things about himself, but not quite now. Let me just start off by pointing out, across Africa, we have huge amounts of talent. We have huge amounts of great ideas, great content. We are bubbling, but we don't really have that kind of footprint when it comes down to the business side of the story. This is, after all, the Dunning Center, which is part of the Henley Business School. So we're really interested in understanding why we're not able to monetize this, why are we not kind of playing up to the level that we should be playing up to. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to look, this is a part of a series of webinars we're going to do on the creative industry. And this is just the first one. And this time, we're focusing on the gaming and animation industry, and in particular in South Africa, which within Africa plays a significant role, understanding this creative potential and what we can do to make this happen, to become something significant. Barry, I'm going to turn to you to add to that.
Thanks, Rajneesh. Yes, beautifully encapsulated there. And as you identified, I'm from the creative. I'm a former musician, not a current musician, and I spent 30, 40 years traveling and performing internationally, mainly with Johnny Clegg's band, as you referenced, for over 20 years. But then what led me to Henley Business School, and I like to think of it as a transference from the sort of the rhythm of the business of rhythm to the rhythm of business, as it were, was a passion for looking at why producers of content on the continent, specifically Southern Africa, weren't performing at the level that they should be, and to analyze structurally what was missing. And as somebody kind of from in the trenches, I thought it was an interesting use of my time, and so therefore I started engaging with Henley, and long story short, ended up qualifying with the MBA and then the coaching program, and now I'm a faculty member, and I teach on the MBA and publish in the fields of creativity and leadership. So my intention and a lot of the backstory for a sort of lobbying or I didn't have to twist Rajneesh's arm too hard to get him to agree to run a series of creative industry webinars, but I felt that it was something really crucial and something that's part of Henley's DNA, and so therefore we've got these really exciting series ahead of you, and it's all exploring ways to drive innovation and growth in Africa's creative and business sectors. So very happy to be here. I'm not an expert in gaming and innovation, but I'll give you my insight as a professional creative and reformed rock and roll drummer.
Thanks, Barry. Right. So, I mean, you know, as everyone knows, I'm ignorant on many things, and I'm not ashamed of this. Mainly because that means I have a chance to learn something new. And in this case, I'm really here very much to learn and also to play devil's advocate. So, you know, when Barry first said, let's talk about the gaming and animation sector, I thought, is this a thing? I mean, apparently it is. And I thought, wow, okay, I need to know more about this. And here we have the delightful Kanda to give us some sense of the size of the industry in South Africa. What are we talking about?
Thanks so much, Prof. Yeah, well, South Africa is probably the biggest animation and game producer of animation and games on the continent when you compare it to other industries across the continent. But when you compare it globally, it's not very much. It's not a great contributor to the global content. However, it's a great contributor to the global market. So, I mean, like you said at the beginning, this topic is not discussed enough, especially by researchers. So the data from the continent is very inconsistent. The data we've got from South Africa is getting old now. It's like looking at 2017, 28. We've got.
Why don't we start off with the big number? What do you think the gaming industry as a whole globally? What's the number here? Do you have a sense of how large it is?
Globally, estimates go from around. I think this includes animation and gaming, is 371 to 374 billion US dollars.
That's billion.
Your global market. Yes, that's billion.
Uh-huh.
So they reckon like there are, I think, 3.3 billion people in the world who are active gamers, which is massive. And there's lots of income to be derived from their in-game purchases and hardware and software purchases.
Okay. So what would you say first of all, maybe we can step back here and tell us how the industry is structured. You know, how does a game end up in the shop? So maybe give us a sense of how the industry, what are the different segments of the industry?
Well, it has a fairly complex value chain, but it is comparable to other sectors. So obviously there's a production sector. A lot of the input really is human creativity, which I think is quite green in terms of an input. And then there's studios that obviously make the content. There's studios that specialize in ideation, so they come up with the games and the animation content. This gets produced in studios around the world, and then it goes through various processes to get it ready for distribution on the various platforms, whether that's broadcast or cinema or a console game or a mobile phone game. There's multiple players in the ecosystem that speak to that.
So what I understood was that about a million jobs in South Africa somehow connected to this, or am I getting this number wrong? Is that correct?
Yeah, so again, this speaks to like inconsistent data, but the stats you're referring to are the research that shows that the cultural and creative industries on the whole in South Africa contribute about 3% of the GDP, almost 3% of the
Okay.
GDP,
Wow. That's
and
a
create about 1
significant
million
number.
jobs.
Oh, oh. So what, a million, give or take 1 million jobs. Is that right? Thato, did you share this number with me originally?
No, thank you again, Prof, and a good day to everyone that has also joined in. I think from a numbers perspective, creative sector holistically, as Kenda had indicated, is not captured well. So some of the data itself isn't merely correct, but if you were to look at, I mean, if, for an example, we're just talking a rough number, currently, if you were talking even something like film, that would be close to about 100,000 jobs.
Okay.
Right. But we don't necessarily then count things like catering on set or, guys that are in the manufacturing space. So about 1 million definitely could be a number, but the data would have to be updated.
Okay. So somewhere I seem to have picked up the fact that the GDP share is about of the creative industry is in the same range as agriculture, at least in the South African economy. Is this a factual piece of data? Wow. Okay. So this really kind of puts it into context, and I think that that really kind of makes one realize what we're talking about here. No, thank you. This is really impressive. By the way, I forgot to introduce both of you, so my apologies. Quickly, Thato, say something about yourself.
My name is Tato Moraka, formerly Mulamu. I'm a creative at heart. I wear two hats. One is a producer, and then the second is an advocate for the sector. We run an institution which normalizes access for young people, and this is within the skills of gaming and animation, including film and VR. Part of why we then ourselves, thought of initiating Leaders in Motion Academy was to bridge the gap and normalize access to quality education. Because of part of the problems that we used to see in the country, one is the skills deficit, especially from a professionalization perspective. And how can small businesses, small studios pivot and get the kind of support, from laptops, the kind of technology that is required, and also the market access that is also required. And to date, we've trained over about 500 young people nationally. And I think we've invested over 17 million into bursaries to date. And that's really just something that generally one would do. So that is me in short. And I think the rest will then unpack as the conversations go.
Thank you. Excellent. Now I want to turn to Abuzwa and Ben, who are creatives in this particular sector. So who actually come up with ideas. Actually, this is where I want to start off with. Maybe you can tell me exactly what how the value chain works. Where are you in the food chain, so to speak? And what are the different, the connections? I'm still struggling to understand global studios, local studios, etc. So give us, and I'm presuming that there are other people in the room who don't know these things. So let's start with that. Maybe Ben, start with that and tell us a little bit about how this
Sure.
works.
Yeah, so I run a studio called Nyamako, and we develop original IP for international markets. And I think in games, at least, distribution is relatively a solved problem, because unlike trying to figure out how to get your film into cinemas, in games you can pay $100 and upload it onto Steam, where 90% of your revenue will come from on PC. So the value chain is like really simple in some ways and complex in others. Making a video game is like every art form ever put together and then made interactive. So it can be really complicated or really simple depending on the game you're making. At the top end, these sort of like AAA games are like thousands of people, and their value chains are enormously complicated because they're working with outsourcing studios. They might be based in the US, but they're outsourcing art to like studios in Vietnam and quality assurance to a studio in Poland, and then working with a team based somewhere in Europe to do all the translation. So as games have matured, the sort of like complexity of making them has got more and more complicated. But fundamentally, you make a game really complicated, you upload it online, do some marketing, hope it goes well. In some ways, the value chain is relatively simple compared to other industries. But yeah, I'm not sure if Uswa would love to disagree with me. She always disagrees with me.
No,
Please disagree with him.
don't disagree. It's really just what Ben has said. Hi, everyone. My name is Avuzwa. I'm the co-founder of South Game Studio. And I do also sit in a position where what we call it here at work is intermediaries, where we are the bridge between the games that Ben is talking about for, indie studios. These are self-publishing studios that really publish their games and, could either publish on Steam or publish on Google Store. And it's very interesting to see how the value chain really goes. But like what Ben is saying, really, the bigger your studio, the complicated it gets. You'll realize in Africa as a whole, it's very difficult to get a publisher. And even the publishers that are already here, it's like you can count them. So it gets complicated as your game grows. But for the indie studios that are starting up, and studios like us that are starting up, it becomes a little bit of not as complicated, but it gets complicated as your game grows. So yeah.
Could I ask a question, an entry-level question, which will certainly help me, and I would imagine some of the folks on the call. But is gaming, and this is as a non-gamer, is in music, it's moved from the product being owned to the product being accessed via platforms like Spotify or Apple, where you literally you pay a contribution and you take it off the library shelf and you listen and you put it back and you metaphorically put it back. With gaming, do you actually buy the game and for your unique use, and then you own that game, or is it mainly accessed through the sort of monthly contribution model?
Well, it depends how you publish your game. So you could publish your game on a free to play, where everyone else has access to your game, but you make money through adverts within the game. So you'll see the games that you download on your phone. There'll be games, maybe it'll tell you to watch 3 adverts to gain coins to continue to the following level. Or you could publish your game, still free to play, and you make money through buying skins. So to move on to a next level or to change your character, you'd have to purchase. You could also publish your game and purchase the game, and it's yours. It's on Steam, and you've published the game, and you've bought the game, and you paid for the game, and you can play it on Steam. So there's different various ways to do it.
Great, that's very clear. Thank you.
Can I just add on to that quickly?
Yeah.
There are some studios, like particularly on the high end, who actually make it that you're buying a license to the game instead of like that physical copy. So very similar to what you're talking about in music, Barry. And actually there was recently a petition that 1 million people signed to send to EU Parliament called Stop Killing Games, which was a movement to have these multiplayer games when not enough people are playing it and the profit for the studio exceeds the costs, or the cost exceeds the profit. They would shut down the multiplayer game and not allow anyone to ever play it again. And so now this group of consumers is essentially suing the game studios, particularly in Europe, to force them to, if they no longer want to support the game, allow the players to somehow still be able to access it, because otherwise this game might not be able to be played ever again. So, yeah.
Okay.
So let me, following up on Barry's kind of comment. So the IP belongs, so when you develop a game, let's take the case of Ben. Ben comes up with a game. Do you sell this outright to the studio, or how does this work?
Yeah, so the word publisher in games is very weird compared to other mediums. A publisher in games is essentially someone who funds development and then handles things like marketing and so on and so forth. They will give you the money, and then in exchange, you make the game. They take all the revenue from the game until they've recouped their investment, right? As part of those deals, you're a studio making the game and they're giving you the funding. Depending on the structure of that deal, they might try and take some of the IP, but it's pretty rare at the indie level. At the sort of like very high level, we're talking about like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. those studios might be having to give away the IP in exchange for that amount of capital. But at the indie level, me and Avuzwa you typically are owning the IP and they're investing in it to get a share of the revenue after it's recouped their investment.
Huh. It's the old days of the record contract. It's like a record deal. It's exactly the same model. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit like the book publishing business, which is less creative, but nonetheless, the same model works with the publishing thing.
The split is way better in games, though. After the recoup has happened, it's typically 30 to 50% you keep.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, 70 to 50% actually. That's the creator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, coming in as a non-gamer, is a global thing, right? Games function on a global level. Isn't there such a thing as Africa-centric or South Africa-centric games that only sell in one region? They tend to be universal in appeal. Is this right? Avuzwa, what's yours? Both of you, I'll ask you one at a time. Avuzwa.
Sorry, please come again, bro.
So, is there such a thing as a South Africa-centric game, game that only sells locally? Do you design games for a kind of a universal audience? People in China are playing the same games as people in South Africa, or do you have specific Africa-specific games, or South Africa-specific games, or Joburg-specific games? I don't know. How does this work?
Not really, no. And it's something that I'm really trying to get out of a lot of upcoming gamers. I believe no, yes, it's a yes and no answer. A lot of starting up indie game studios, you'll find their unique selling point is always we are creating an African narrative game. It's an African game, but you take a look at the mechanics of the game and the feel and the play of the game. It's not one that really grasps the audience. Whereas you look at games like Broforce, that was a game that was not released. It was not a game that was, it's a South African game or it's an African game. It was just really a good game that made it globally, right? Do we have something there? Do we have bold? Do we have some really great stories and different unique mechanics in our stories that we can put through games? Yes, we do. And so, yeah, we do develop games that are for South Africa with a South African audience, but that's very limiting because of how big the gaming industry is globally. So you would want someone to create a game that's really good to play, whether you are in India or you're in the US or you are wherever you are in the world. And only then, do people start to wonder, where is this game made? Where does it come from? And then it's like, oh, it's from South Africa. And so then you've kind of really entered into the market. So, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. No, this is interesting. Kanda, I think you want to give us some numbers here.
I do, yes. So I think, in terms of creating games for the African continent, there's a large disparity between the amount of games that are being produced on the continent and the amount of revenue that's coming in for both animation and gaming, as opposed to what South Africans are actually spending on gaming. So the stat I have here for us is that in 2023, 26.5 million South Africans spent approximately $266 million on video games. That's a fraction of the global spend. It's 0.14 of global spend. But still, it's a significant amount of money. And if you look at the revenue that's coming into the South African companies, which was estimated, like I said, the numbers I have are from 2017, 2018, was at around about $27 million. So that was the money coming into the sector from South African products and services. And in 2023, we've got a number of $266 million being spent just on games. That's not just the animation. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for us to build deeper into the value chain and to connect with our own audiences and create content for our own audiences.
Okay. So, I mean, what I'm picking up is really that this is something that that matters. It matters in every sense of the word, in terms of employment, opportunities, in terms of growth, in terms of meeting a demand. And what I'm also picking up, and I think you guys, Ben and Abuzwa, you're being modest about your abilities. That you guys are playing at a global level in this industry. So I mean, I would like you to blow your own horn a little bit here and tell us a little bit. Ben, let me turn to you.
Sure. Yeah, co-founded Nyamocorp in 2016, and in 2018 we launched our first game called Semblance, which was the first African developed game on any Nintendo console ever. And we recently announced our latest project called Relooted, which is an African futurist heist game where you reclaim real-life looted African artifacts from Western museums. We revealed that in an event in Los Angeles, and since then it's been seen about 20 million times and been seen across Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN, AFP, Reuters, a bunch of those sort of places. And by budget, team size, and scope, it's the largest game ever made in sub-Saharan Africa. Is that enough tooting, Prof? Please make it stop.
Abuzwa, do you want to add something? Tell us a bit, give us a sense of not just yours, but also the global. The point I'm trying to make is that we have the potential to play on the global market.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Your work, you also.
Yeah, definitely.
Represent that.
I mean, I don't know if I can top after Ben, but so I own South Game Studio. It's a female-owned studio from South Africa. It was founded quite recently, about 4 years ago. We've won the Games for Change Impact pitch in Cape Town 2022. We've also been part of the Swiss top, I guess, finalist for the Swiss She Got Game Funds. We have built Sizwe. Sizwe was more inspired by Shaka Ilembe. It's a game about a young girl who's trying to learn about the culture, and it's an open world PC game. But we've yet paused the game because we're still learning a little bit more about the industry, and we're currently going to launch a menstrual cycle game, highlighting period across the world. Firstly, it was just in Africa, but as we researched more, we realized that it's a global thing. And we're just a team of 3 for now. We still create jobs by freelancing. We're still quite small, but yeah, that's what we currently do. And I advocate for women in games very much. Because we realize that there isn't a lot of games told from a woman's perspective. Games like Menstrual Cycle, teaching people more about, the African global pandemic, which is the sanitary pads and women not going to school because they just simply cannot afford. So we're using the platform and our skills to kind of tell impactful games. So I guess I'd say South Game Studio is an impactful video game studio.
Okay, excellent. No, so we have a lot of talent, and I think we're coming to this point. Barry, I want to bring you in on this point because I want to now kind of zoom out a little bit and come back to the creative industry in general. And I mean, I see parallels with this and the music industry and other, your end of the thing. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I've got strong, slightly provocative views on all of this. So firstly, Ben, Abuzwa, I celebrate what you're doing because I think that's I think you're right on track with where producers need to be heading in this part of the world, and that is to tell local stories but packaged in a world-class packaging. And in so doing, the rest of the world will take notice. And if it's not packaged in a way that it can be assimilated, then it won't be noticed. And so for me, the creative industries generally out of Southern Africa, there's huge talent. We've got untapped pools of talent. Where we aren't performing or where we're underperforming is packaging that content in a world-class fashion. So I think that's kind of the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about today, really, because we're not in the music industry. There's no shortage of good performers and composers in sub-Saharan Africa, and in fact, the modern music business globally is built on IP from Africa. You know, if you think about it historically, from an ethnomusicology historical perspective, modern music from bebop to blues to rock and roll comes from Africa, and specifically West Africa. So there's we are arguably the creators of the entertainment sector, but are not participating at a percentage that we should be. So the question is why? Is that a shortage of talent, or is it a shortage of resource access and education for packaging? So there we go. I think I've thrown the challenge onto the table, Rajneesh, and I'll hand it over back to you. And the similarities with what we're talking about here and the music business there's huge overlap. And I'll end off by saying a number of years ago, I contributed to a soundtrack for an animation from South Africa, telling a complete South African story. It was a movie called Zambezia, and it was packaged in my opinion in a world-class case, and it broke records. I think it's the highest earning. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is the highest revenue generator of any African animations thus far. So that was proof that you could showcase an African story in world-class fashion and succeed, and produce locally and export globally. So I'll leave it there for now. But that's my thoughts on the sort of systemic view of what we're on about here tonight.
Now, I think that one of the critical issues, and is really how can we make this better? I mean, it's, as you say, 3% of GDP, almost the same as agriculture. Plenty of opportunity, plenty of scope, plenty of potential. What can be done for us to actually actualize, to make this to deliver on this potential? And there, I think Thato has many thoughts. So I'm going to turn to you. Thato, tell me, how can we make this happen? What do we need to do?
No, thanks, Prof. And I think, Barry kind of, highlighted, part of the key challenges that really are, have become like the stumbling block, for the growth of the sector. Because, if you look at it from a government perspective, the creative sector, right, I think this research was done 2017. We actually employ more than the mining sector. Right now, that even as a statistic has not managed to change how government sees the sector and how to invest. And also with regards to then the policies which currently are not enabling enough for even incentives or tax rebates if investors from outside want to invest money into South Africa. And but at a barrier level, and I think this is really what inspired us to to start Lima, was the cost of education itself is also a barrier to entry. The issue of resources, meaning, I mean, if you want laptops or computers that are able to generate high-level games or animation content, it requires also things like space, cloud space. The cost of data in South Africa is extremely high. So it also makes it impossible just for young people to be able to develop and grow. Yet again, if you look at then the global stats for gaming, it's a $3 trillion industry. Africa, Middle East were the second biggest consumers of games. So that kind of also is just a clear sign that we consume more than actually develop. And if we go to the ground level, what we find is a cost of, if you're going to an institution or private institution, it will cost you about 900,000 rands. Just to do a 3-year degree. So these are some of the studies that are showing part of the challenges. So you then also at a township and rural level have bread and butter issues. If you go to your parents and you say that I need 900,000 rand, and if you look at the middle class and lower class from an earning perspective, that itself also becomes a big issue, which is, kind of led to like, free education. And that's also been a big debate. And how do we ensure that education itself is accessible? And I think through that, maybe we could start to see a different kind of thinking, because yes, Barry is absolutely right. The talent itself is there. I mean, we've worked with some of, amazing youngsters that are consistently developing, and then they say, well, I'm having a challenge with a marketing budget. I don't have access to markets. I don't have the right networks. I mean, even to publish a game, as Ben has indicated, costs money. So how do we solve that problem for township and rural areas? And now we were also faced with something called load shedding in South Africa for a big period of time. When you want to render your game, when you need to do post-production, those also just make it impossible for you to be able to service. So there's a big need for a rethink, from a government perspective, because if you look at mining, agriculture, those sectors are well funded from a support perspective. But a cost to develop an animation could even cost like close to about 200 million to about 100 million. But our funding, for an example, in animation is about 500,000 just for development from the NFVF. If you look at games, I don't even think that there's funding for games from government. So, and this is 30 years into our democracy. So there's a master plan that has been developed, with the aim of growing the creative sector by 2040, but it's not seen as a business by government. Therefore, it makes it impossible also for investors to trust to say, if I put my money into this game, how will I make my money back? The gaming sector in South Africa, I think, is about 5 billion. I think there's about 252 gaming studios. I think Avuswa can share maybe more detail. I think that study was also done by Tsimologong. And I think out of the 252, only 6 or 5 are the ones that are generating revenue out of that 5 billion. So the question then, what happens to the rest of the other studios? Who's going to invest? Who's going to be the publisher? Are they big enough publishers even in Africa? I think maybe Ben and Avuswa can speak on that, and Kanda from an animation perspective. I think Barry also touched on the animated series. I think it was done by Triggerfish, if I'm not wrong. That's one of like our big animation companies here in South Africa. But we have a few companies that are doing quite well. And they themselves also had to understand that for you to do well, you also need to market yourself globally. And for you to even attend festivals, it's a cost. So we're finding that a lot of the raw talent itself is in the majority of young people. And I mean, one animation studio, I think if it's a, well-built animation studio, could create close to about 500 jobs, So there's opportunity for jobs to be created. But when you knock at government, they seem not to fully comprehend, even though the numbers and the stats are saying that this is a big market, it can create jobs. I mean, even if you look at manufacturing, I think this is a great example that Kanda likes to make about like a Mickey Mouse. It's an animated series, but from a merchandising perspective, kids are buying Mickey Mouse T-shirts. So you start to then realizing that the fashion industry benefits. You look at the technology industry also benefits. But the question also then is, who, for an example now, does gaming belong to? Ben, if you want funding for gaming, who do you go to in South Africa? Can government fund? Is there a bank that you can go to talk about funding for games? So there's quite a lot of challenges, I think, from a ground level perspective, but the opportunity itself is there. Where we find the need for business schools, to start really now, coming behind a sector like the creative sector is becoming an important conversation. But I think currently we really have an opportunity to scale it up. The question is, do we have the right leaders to actually enable an environment at a policy level that will ensure that the sector succeeds?
Okay, so there are really two things here I want that come up. One is there's a role on the policy side to enable the industry, but there's also, I think, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. So, when government gets involved in things don't always work out. In fact, they tend to get worse. I obviously will bring up the Nollywood story, and Nollywood has succeeded despite government. And now that the government wants to put its nose into this matter, people think, oh, no, 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 you're going to ruin a good thing. I can see your point about education and the need to get these things going. But from a point of a creative point, and I'm going to turn I'm going to come to Kanda, because I know Kanda has to say something, but before that, I want to bring the creatives themselves. Do you think it's a good idea to engage the government into this process? To what extent will this actually make a difference? I'm thinking about, yeah, okay, let me start. Let's start off with Avuzwa first.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much, Prof. Oh man, it's a hate and love relationship with the government. We've spent so many years. I work at Simulukong as well for a project manager for creative projects, and we've really been pushing the intermediaries a part of it, where we are bridging the gap between the creatives and the middleman that really brings in the money or does the business development for creatives. And we've really been trying to get the government into the room, and I've worked very closely with Kenda on this, where we want the government, because we figured maybe we speak a different language with the government. They have a different language, we have a different language, and it just ends up, we both just end up giving up on each other. But over the past 3 or 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, we've really been getting the government involved and letting them see where we are as the creative and where we need their help. So to answer your question, again, it's a yes and no question. It's a yes and no answer. Yes, we definitely do need the government funding. When Tato spoke around some of the stats that we did and the research we did here at Simulukong, and where some of these studios are sitting, a lot of people will ask, where are the studios sitting? We incubate gaming studios, and our mandate is to really grow the gaming sector. But they tend to find out immediately after the incubation that it's quite a tough industry and there isn't funding. So how do we make sure that we're growing the sector? Because what you tend to find is that once they finish the incubation, they have to look for other jobs within the creative sector to then continue the gaming studio on the side, which is what South Game Studio is doing. So if there was funding and support from the government, that wouldn't be the case. I would be using my passion and skills in gaming, in creating these games and being part of these studios that are very successful. But then again, it's then a no, because, like we all know, when the government gets involved, then there's too many, things that get involved. They too many wants that they want. They already want something before they even understand the industry. So that's my take. That's my take on the question, Prof.
Ben, let me give you an opportunity here to add.
I would say, can the government make it worse? No, because it's already pretty bad without them involved. It's kind of an urban myth at this point, but video games are technically legally defined as film in South Africa. And the reason for that is because someone was selling knockoff Nintendo consoles in South Africa in the 90s. So Nintendo came into South Africa and sued this distributor. And as part of that case, they had to classify which creative medium games were part of. So games technically are considered film in South Africa. So the government bodies that handle film in South Africa also theoretically should be handling games. And at one point in time, the NFVF, about a decade ago, actually had funding for games, but they didn't tell anybody and nobody applied because they didn't know it existed. And you also have the Film and Publications Board, who are there to understand and rate film. They don't understand how to classify games. So again, at one point in the past, to get a video game rated in South Africa, you had to put gameplay of the game on a tape and send it into the Film and Publications Board to get it rated. So like the question of whether should we get in government involved or not is sort of like a false equivalency, because the way government is involved in games is already hurting what we as game developers can do. And the brief times we have engaged with government, it has resulted in positive gains. So we need to be careful, but there are some gains happening. I think the knock-on effect of a certain court case with Google in the last few years has resulted in the Google Play Store actually being required to show South African and African-made games on the Google Play Store. I don't know how well that is enforced, but that's an example of where this impact can be had. So, you know, it's already going badly without government, based on government making decisions for games without us being involved. So I'm not sure it can get much worse, to be honest. So we might as well get involved now.
I think, Prof, it is a love-hate relationship with government, but they're critical in the sense.
So where your camera seems to have gone off.
Oh, it's on my side. Not sure what's going on. I can see myself.
Yeah.
Yep, we can see you.
Yeah. Go on.
Oh,
Go on.
So I think the love-hate relationship, I think, Prof, also is that, you know, then if government doesn't get involved, how do you then protect investors' interests who want to come from outside and invest in South Africa, for an example, right? Because, you know, at a policy level, something has to be a guiding tool. So last year, we were part of a consortium. We actually held a creative session here at Henley campus, facilitated by Barry to, you know, so the consortium existed of 6 different companies. The whole idea was to lobby government and lobby private sector to start to understand what the gaming industry actually is. How does it work? To classify a game under film, yes, for sure. You know, the processes could have similarities, but it then ensures that the gaming sector doesn't have a fighting chance to actually grow. So there is a need for every stakeholder, both government, private sector, and civil society, to sit down and figure out how do we support these younger studios to be able to pivot, and how do we also get guys like Ben Avuzwas to also mentor and guide other younger studios. And from an animation perspective, understanding, you know, what the role of a graphic designer is, how much money is in that, VFX, cost of Unreal engines, as a tool that you are going to utilize in order for you to be able to build, you know, these platforms. I mean, at one point, I had a very concerning conversation with someone who was from a particular division of government, and they said, but, you know, because what you find is that there's the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, you have the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, you have the Department of Trade, Industry and Commission, then you have, you know, the Department of Small Business. All of them speak to one common goal, but they don't align when it comes to the creative sector. So if you have to pitch an idea, you have to pitch it to 4 different ministries. And there's a high chance that that minister might change, this minister might change, this minister might change, this minister might change. So you are consistently battling this snakes and ladder, this chess game of trying to get the creative sector to move as one. Now, also, you find that film, gaming, animation, we're all talking, you know, different languages at different times, where else we actually need to find a way to be a common voice. And I think even through that, then maybe government will start to listen. But there is a real need for us to really start changing the mindset and driving the education around the true value of this industry, the jobs that it can create, the impact it can also have in the re-socialization of society from an education perspective, because it plays a very key and pivotal role. And also, how do broadcasters come into play to ensure that, because the music industry also benefits the sector, the film sector also benefits the gaming sector, and vice versa. It's an intersected industry. So government is going to be pivotal. The question just becomes, in our democratic state, you know, now that we have a government of national unity, what does that mean? Now you have like 10 different political parties who maybe have a different understanding of what the creative sector is. And we really kind of like are hoping for the best. But to your point, I believe that as an industry, we all are doing, you know, individual work, you know, to support the sector. And it's not enough. I think it does require, you know, government support from a funding perspective, because we're going to need patient capital, possibly for the next 10 years, where we need to keep trying, fail, maybe one project gets in, but something needs to happen at a government level. And we really are trying to lobby as much as we can to get them to come to the table more intentionally.
Okay. Let me give Kanda the mic. She's been quiet, and I'm sure she has a lot to say here.
You guessed correctly there. I'm getting a pop-up. Okay, right. So I think yes, government is problematic in terms of this sector because of the somewhat limited understanding of how the gaming and animation sectors work. I mean, just sometimes I find just the differentiation of gaming, animation, film problematic, because if you look at the large global companies that have cornered the market and are drawing the largest revenues, they have got IPs that span across multiple platforms and mediums. So think about Angry Birds that became a movie, and movies that have become games, and Disney properties that are all over, or every kind of media type, all over merchandise, every kind of media type. They are raking in large amounts of money. And that model I haven't really seen successfully duplicated on the continent. I feel like, you know, the South African animation and gaming industry, like we said, has a love-hate relationship with government. But I have also done development work in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in sorry, yes, in various countries across the continent. And what I found is that the industries there are really nascent. I mean, they are where we were at, South African industries were at 20 years ago. When I go over and talk to people who are running industry associations in those areas, in those countries, they really have a long way to go. You know, there's, I don't want to mention names, but there's one industry association on the continent that took 4 years just to get their industry association set up before they could do anything. Vast amounts of money was spent on just finding the classification so that they could interface with government, because every time they went to government, they were like, we've got our body. They were like, no, you don't. You have to go away and do some more paperwork. And so if you look across the continent, I think South Africa really has an opportunity here to forge the path for other African countries, you know, to follow. But I also feel like there is a lot of money being spent in game development. And so hopefully that's enough of a carrot. I think government needs to, first of all, as a basic, just keep the lights on and keep the cost of data manageable. And then also, you know, to kind of look at creating incentives perhaps for foreign investment into animation and gaming companies. Maybe just get some things out of the way. Maybe there's policies in place that are hindering progress, and to just really engage with industry and change that. And then also on a policy level, we need to look at intellectual property as well. There's there's a lot of complications in terms of protecting your IP, which is actually the fundamental law that you leverage to trade in your intellectual property and your intangible assets. And that's often quite a fuzzy area in certain places on the continent, including South Africa.
Ben, I see you nodding your head in the mention of IP.
Yes, until I heard where Kanda was going, and then I was going to scream, but that's okay. I think when we talk about IP protection, sometimes I think some of the difficulty with foreign direct investment, at least in terms of creative industries, South Africa, is how like buying studios here, even if you get, if someone invests in your studio, an equity investment, it's very difficult for them to buy the studio over time. It's quite complex because the South African government and the policies want to keep as much of the IP here as well, which means the IP doesn't travel around the world as well as it could, right? How can we talk about competing on an international level when the IP itself cannot travel internationally. Like no one can buy South African IP. An American Disney might want to buy like a really great animation company, but if they haven't set up the structure of their company or the IP correctly, they could not do that, right? And in terms of protecting the IP, like Kanda was talking about, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to that, unfortunately. I think if someone wants to steal your IP, you're already making money at that point in time. Our first game, Semblance, was cloned by a Vietnamese studio, and it has been downloaded 1 million times on the Google Play Store, and they made $200 in total. So I'm a bit cynical about like protecting IP, but I think it's really important that you can allow IP to travel. And I think that is a really big problem for South African companies a lot of the time. Yeah.
I feel the IP discussion overlaps with the music industry IP discussion. Barry, I have a feeling you want to add something here.
Yeah. How long have we got? This covers. So Ben, yeah, I agree. I love the metaphor of IP traveling. That's brilliant. And that's a huge obstacle for sure. If I think about going back to our narrative and where we were 10 minutes ago about government, is government needed here? Do they play a meaningful role at the table? Firstly, to package this kind of work, whether it's music or gaming, to package it in a way that it can travel. Is resource heavy, so you need a lot of you need money to do that, and so the final varnish for an album or a collection of songs, and I'm sure it's the same as the same sort of value journey as animation. That final process of adding the varnish, which makes it attractive to a global market, is incredibly expensive. So how do young creatives and startups access that kind of money? I think that's a stumbling block. I don't think government is necessarily the stakeholder that should be providing that, but I do think government should provide the seed sort of incubation, the seed funding to legitimize the industry, going back to Tatu's point. And once it's legitimized, venture capital that has got no emotion and might not feel the same excitement about an album or a game would enter the field because they're guaranteed of a good return. If I think about government success stories, so Ben, I also agree that I don't think we should give up on government. I think we have a unique issue where we are regionally government-wise, but if you think about Australia, the UK, Canada, Sweden in particular, they played this game of showcasing musical talent. They saw the value. They invested funds and strategy in showcasing their talent globally, educating and showcasing talent, very much the same way as Westgrow do in the Western Cape for small wine producers. Exactly the same model, but they did that at scale with music. And if you think about ABBA, one of the biggest revenue generators in musical history, they came out of this program. So I think that government legitimacy can work. Does the government need to actually fund everybody? I think that's a slippery slope, but I think they can unlock private funding. And I think that's the biggest obstacle right now. And then Rajneesh, if I go back to you, before I hand the mic back to you, I'd like to look at so I'm a fan of Nollywood, and I'm a fan of Nigerian creative output across the board. It's the most beautiful music in the world, in my opinion. And Nollywood is a cluster of small, innovative solo operators, mostly funded by family and friends. So that it is successful, but they're not global exporters. They should be. And so the question is, is that the way to go? Is the Nollywood model to go, or do large consolidated players create more sustainable growth? And I think that's probably where we should learn from Nollywood and do that in our part of the world. And my good friend in Lagos, Femi Odugbemi, He's being very active in this space, and his whole passion. I think he's the only West African contributor to the Oscars, and he's the only judge from West Africa in the Oscars, and so he's passionate about showcasing West African stories, and he says that the greatest stories of Africa haven't been told yet, and I think there's wisdom in that statement. So I've said a lot. I could say a lot more, but I'm gonna shut up now and give the mic back to you, Rajneesh.
Well, I think this is an interesting choice you propose. Thinking about going singly or going with the big model. Avuzwa, you've been silent, and I give you the mic for a bit here. So what do you think? What's your thoughts on this? What can we learn from the West African example? Is there something, or do you think this is not relevant?
Oh no, it's definitely relevant. And I don't know. I think also looking at creative industry, not just gaming and animation, looking at your fashion industry, looking at the music industry, we tend to really, South African creatives really tend to take the world by storm. You look at the genre of Mapiano, you look at Maxhosa, you look at Tebe Mapuku. Those people are really, or those creatives are really people that are really showing us that we can do something here and it's global. We can really follow the Nollywood, where we really are producing something that's really for us, but it's really global. Yeah, I think it's really time for us to really focus on what we can do and let the world see. I do also believe that our unique selling point really lies right in the amount of stories that we can tell through not just gaming, animation. You look at the animation of it was produced by one of the Zambian producers as well. Super Team 4. You look at Super Team 4, the collaboration that really happened there, it was not just the Zambian studios, like a lot of animators across the world, and it's really taken the world up by storm. Those stories are just the gold that really exists even within games themselves. That's really our unique selling point, because there's different mechanics that can truly come out of those. Case in point, and actually when we were building Sizwe, we were looking for different assets around, the old housing, the old huts that the Zulus used to live in. When you go online and try get those, and when you're prototyping, you usually use assets that are available. But we wanted our game to be so unique, we had to build that from scratch because they didn't exist anywhere in the internet. That's where the unique selling point is for us. Even some of the mechanics, we wanted to implement the stick fighting, but you couldn't find those animation online. So there's so much more that we can do that can still attract not just the government, but even outside investors. We really do need our government. We need them at the back of us. But like I said, it's a love and hate thing. But yeah, so we should continue doing it our way. Learning from best practices, of course, of industries that are really doing it, and it's working with them for them without the government. I do think we also could implement best practices there.
Ben.
Thank you. I kind of want to go back to something Kanda said, which was the local games market is 250 million rand, right, Kanda? I think you said, and South African game developers only consume 25 million rand of that. And I think that's a really interesting breakdown. And I think, sorry, Kanda, I feel like I'm disagreeing with you endlessly. You're the one with the data. I just have opinions, but I will try anyway. Your inclination from that data is we should make more locally themed things to acquire more of that market. You sort of touched on that, right? But there have actually been a lot of attempts at South African themed and inspired games, and none of them have ever recouped their investment or been big hits. And I think as someone who is making an African inspired and themed game, I think what I'm starting to think, we have people buying games in South Africa, but do they care about South African content when they've grown up their entire lives consuming international content? That is kind of the conundrum we have, is I think with every other medium like Nollywood, local consumption, music, local consumption. There's almost a local consumption of local content that happens in these other mediums that we don't necessarily have in games. And I think that's what's going to be really tricky for us to overcome, is that delineation of 10% of the revenue spent on games going to South African creators. That's because we're even with South Africans buying games, we're competing with international standards and international people, not with locals. And so that's a conundrum we're going to have to figure out. It's like there are people buying games in South Africa, but they're buying international games. And so we are also, again, competing with international standards in South Africa. And so it's a really tricky thing, which I honestly wish was not true, but the data proves that. And I think it's tricky. Of course, Wakanda and Tato are coming for me now. It's time to leave.
I think one of the I think, Tato, before I let you in here, let me just quickly bring up the comparison again with the music industry. So we have creatives, we have people who generate individuals, geniuses who come up with a great concept, a great idea, and then it has to be. Then you need a village, as it were, to make that happen. From you have to produce the music. You need the other musicians to join in. You need the studios, you need the sound engineers, you need all that type of thing. Then you have the marketing people. So it becomes bigger and bigger. Now, is there some sense that, of course, there's a scale issue here, because if you want to play in this game in the music industry, from what I understand, you really need to have some serious amount of resources in terms of networking and putting all of these things together. I think the same thing applies in the gaming industry, that you need to have all of these different actors. And that requires muscle, to make it happen. And especially in an industry which requires so much money. I mean, you need to have just the computing power needed to do what you do is massive. It's not a small thing. Whereas a musician, in principle, could take their phone and record something. I mean, the technology has reached that point that you can actually do these things and have a basic tune and be able to sell it. Whereas you guys need to, before you can sell something, you have to put a lot of work into it. You need to have, you can't be using your phone to do this. You need assets, you need money. Scale is important.
Sure.
So, I mean, so when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, are small players doomed to failure in this industry, because you need so much money and so much resources to make it to really play the game? I see Ben nodding his head. Am I touching a nerve here? And I see that Tato is ready to pounce. Okay, shall I let Tato pounce first, or Ben come back? Let's let Tato go on.
No, thanks, Prof. I think it is one, a very sad story, but the sad story itself has the potential. And I believe, what we've seen is that the lack of understanding of the industry is possibly one of the reasons why people are not consuming local games and local animation, because they don't know. I come from the film sector, and and one of the things, I truly advocate for is that how do we utilize the film sector to promote and market locally developed assets, from games and animation, right? I used to be part of one of the biggest telenovelas or soapies in South Africa, and we launched one of the top 4 banks, and I think this was in 2013. They did an integrated storyline, and I think that particular bank had invested about, close to about 20 million, if I'm not wrong, for us to actually act out, because I was playing an ad agency MD, and we were coming up with this campaign. And as this campaign is about to launch in 3 months' time, audiences would follow this particular story to a point where by the time it launched with this particular bank, people, the show, I think, we had audience of about 8 to 9 million people watching on a day-to-day, because it was a Monday to Friday soapy. So I think for me, that's why I really, really promote collaboration, because collaboration is going to be one of the key drivers of economic growth, specifically for the sector. That the gaming industry needs to find a way to speak to the film industry. The film industry needs to find a way to speak to the animation industry, the music industry, and we all come as one. But Nigeria, from a Nollywood perspective, they did what wouldn't be common to the Western world, which is quality control, right? So you would see boom mics coming into shot. The sound quality wasn't great, but they produce stories, because what is king in our world is story. If you tell an exceptionally good story, people don't actually focus a lot on the quality of the content. Yes, I know we want to produce PC games. If we don't have the money, the question becomes, what do we do now? When we work with most of our young students, they have created films, they have created games. And I say, guys, just keep creating, put your stories out. At some point in time, it will catch. But we just need to find an aligned way. I do believe that the youngsters, if things don't change, I've got a good feeling that we will start to see innovation start to happen, right? How do we utilize platforms like YouTube? I think that is a platform that can be really utilized to really start pushing, gaming content. We tried to develop even a format for gaming that is a reality show, right? And we're looking at other models. We're trying to look at how do we create maybe more documentary. So people must know how many studios we have and the potential, but also where can people find these games? I mean, I'm not a gamer myself, but I do believe that there is a way. We can start quite small and, start to build up. But I'm of the hope, seeing the hope in these young people that this industry is boiling with potential. If we just invest more intentionally, get business schools to get involved, to get universities to get involved, get private sector to get involved, and let's start with this seed funding. I've got a good feeling that in the next 5 to 10 years, we definitely will start to see South Africa and Africa compete at a global level.
Excellent. Okay, no, I like optimism. Even though sometimes I sound like I'm trying to bring everyone down, but hey, that's my job. I think that no, there is some hope here. I'm going to turn to people on the ground. Our creatives in the room here. I mean, are you losing optimism? Are you thinking there is a future here? Let's start with Avuzwa.
Thanks, Prof. Oh yeah, I'm definitely optimistic about the future. And yes, there's so much that we are to give to the world of gaming. And I also just want to echo what Tato is saying, that we need to develop as often as we can with the resources that we have. Just a point that I wanted to also make, I don't know, it might come off as a question. I've come to realize that I like to generalize gaming as Africa as well, because then it becomes much more bigger. In terms of the marketing side of it, we tend to market our games a bit late, which is what we're also trying to do, to market games a bit early, but there's never enough funds to do the marketing. But I also, just in depth of the marketing strategies that already exist in the world for gaming sometimes don't work for the African market, specifically South African market. We can take best practices from them, which is why Ben was saying that a lot of the users that play games actually play games that have been developed outside instead of games here. And I think my question is, are we missing the marketing point? How do we market to the market that already exists here so that they start tapping into the games that we make? But yeah, I'll just leave that to the floor.
Okay. No, this is interesting. Okay, now let's come to Ben first before we branch off again. Ben.
Optimism. Optimism. I feel like I'm doing your job half the time by being the devil's advocate. I'm so sorry, Prof. I'm always optimistic just because I like making video games for a living, but I think it's important to be pragmatic, and some of the numbers are particularly scary. At least for indie games, I would say probably 90 to 95% of revenue comes from the platform Steam on PC. I don't have to say accurate data, unlike Canva. I can just throw out numbers that don't exist. So I'm sure it's about 90%. But what is real data is in 2019, 8,000 games released on Steam, and 67% of them made less than $1,000. So like the amount of the billions and trillions of dollars that go to game developers, it goes to an enormously small fraction of those game developers. So if you're competing with the world, right, and that's most of the revenue, we're not talking about like the top 60%. We're literally talking about the world's best top 20, top 10% game developers for the revenue. And again, I think that's where we always have to be honest about the standards and the quality we have to produce. I think what Tata said about quality not being important is still true though, but for different, more complicated reasons that I can go into. There's a whole generation of kids that grew up playing Roblox for some reason, unfortunately. So their expectations of quality have gone down, but they're still well-made games. But very few games do actually make their investment back. It's a very hit-driven business, probably similar to film. Yeah.
I have two kids in the house who Roblox. They know I have no idea what it is, but they're all excited about it. So yes, we're there now. I think Kanda wants to respond. So let me not paraphrase Kanda. Kanda, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Prof. I just want to circle back a little bit to what Ben was saying about, firstly about IP. So yes, I think there are business models that where you really can embrace piracy, which is what you're really talking about. Someone copying your product and making money from it. But IP is a little bit more complex in terms of protecting the rights of the contributors. So there's layers and layers of contracts and law that are required, and so we need to make sure that when you bring someone onto your team who is contributing, that they are not going to be able to come back to you for royalties in 35 years' time, where you can't remember your own name, let alone what contract you had with them and where you filed it. So I think, we need to think about just IP frameworks. And yes, so there is a lot of piracy on the continent, especially, and this kind of circles into your point about local games and local appeal. The fact is that Africans often don't have the money to pay for games and content. So there's a roaring trade in sort of pirated films and games that are copied and pirated across the continent. There are, weirdly enough, economic opportunities within that. And if you embrace that, there could potentially be some very interesting business models that come out of there around how to connect with your audiences locally, how to monetize your content both within South Africa and across the continent, either through product placement deals or other ways of engagement. Because what I'm seeing in the games industry specifically is it is becoming, in my opinion, something much like social media. It's where people meet, it's where people talk and exchange, and it's a platform that can be monetized much like other social media platforms. So there are some interesting business models that can emerge from that.
Yeah, we have someone in the comments in the chat function who is pointing out that data is really expensive in South Africa, and given that gaming is becoming something that has become very much based around mobile phones and portable. And he mentions that in India, data costs between 1.75 and 3 Rand per gigabyte, whereas in South Africa, it is much higher. And I thought this was an interesting point, that again comes to your point, Kanda, that that infrastructure costs then kind of reduce the market, reduce opportunities and so forth. I thought that is in fact a good point. Now, I think we're coming close. So one of the points that seems to keep coming up nowadays is AI. I'm getting sick and tired of hearing about AI, but it's something, and it matters. And it seems to, and the question is, how is it going to change things? First of all, how will it change things for this particular sector, and then how will it make a difference in particular to South Africa? So let's go through everyone here, and let's start off. Let's start off with Vizwa and Ben, and then we'll come down to Kanda and Thato. Vizwa.
Thanks, Prof. Yeah, it's the talk of the year. That's our theme this year, AI. I think, well, I'm not scared of AI like everyone else is, and I don't think we should be. It's the worst thing. If you've utilized AI, ChatGPT, DeepSync, it's the worst thing. Especially if you think you're going to build a game using AI, some of the code that it gives you is really the worst. But what it has done outside of development, it has really, for indie game studios like myself, where there is admin that needs to be done, it has really been helpful in accelerating that. And I think just the production of the production of gaming or just running a studio, it's really been helpful in getting things done and getting less admin out of the way. But in terms of technicalities and all, I really think it's the worst thing. I wouldn't recommend it to any game developer or any creative, but I've seen creative using it in a very good way. My thing with AI also is credit it if you've used it. That's where I stand with AI. If you've used AI, just credit it. No one is going to kill you. Don't take work that isn't fully yours, but yeah.
All right, Ben.
Gamers will kill you. Gamers are very anti-AI for some reason. They really don't like it. All the platforms are very anti-AI in games. I don't, like it was said, I don't think any of the tools for game development are particularly great just yet. I think some of them are really helpful additional tools, but you have to actually already be good at the skill for it to be useful. So you have to be a pretty good programmer already to know that the code it's spitting out, like Vuzwa mentioned, is bad. And if you can't debug it, you're kind of, up in arms. So there are you are capable of making pretty poor things with AI at the moment. It's getting better all the time. But I think all it's going to create is artisanal, handmade work being very valuable. We're all artisanal people now, artisanal video games, artisanal musicians, because AI can just generate something. So I think the differentiation between AI made and human made is very clear right now. It'll get closer, but I think at least in games, the consumers do not like AI at all. And there are a lot of controversies when it comes out that a developer has used AI to make their game. It's happened a few times recently. So at least on the consumption side, I don't think a lot of game developers are going to be using AI for that reason for quite a while.
So what is the potential good side of it? We're focusing on why it isn't any good, but where can it really make a difference? Let's talk about South Africa. How can AI help South African gaming industry? Does it give us a better way out? Is what I'm going. I'm trying to end on a positive, optimistic note here.
On AI, Prof, come on.
Will AI help you? Will apart from
it does help. It does help. I don't think there's anything unique about the South African or African situation, at least in games, that makes it more helpful to us necessarily. But I think it is an additional tool that we can use and gets you to a first playable or a first version of something that you can iterate faster. So it probably will end up bringing down development times for games, just because it gets to an initial version much faster. Anyone who's ever done any creative writing or even academic writing knows the first draft is the hardest. AI gets you to that first draft almost immediately that you can then edit from, as an example. So okay. You forced me to be positive. That's as good as I could do, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Kanda, your thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, this is one of my my very chewy topics that I've been biting into recently. And I think, yes, obviously there will be challenges that come up, and it's very important for policymakers to take notice and understand what the potential pitfalls are for a mass rollout of AI. We've also got to look at frameworks for understanding what the implications are of large tech companies who are scraping the internet for input, especially in the creative industries. And we need to watch that quite carefully. But on the other hand, I think, when I was trying to choose a career when I was in my early 20s, there was social media was not even invented back then. The internet was just, I just kind of was hearing about email. And so now, these kind of industries that have emerged have created massive opportunity and helped connect people and also created massive opportunities for people in the creative sector. The creator economy is something quite interesting to watch as well. And I'm very excited to see what this new tool set will bring into play and what new sectors in the creative industries will emerge.
Thank you, Sato. I think one of the things that strikes me, and I see in the comments that are now warming up, and how will AI help mobilize, address the issue of resources, underdeveloped communities getting access, giving people opportunities where they didn't exist before. Do you think AI is going to make a difference in that regard?
So I think, Prof, it's going to take us back to what started the conversation on one's end, when we started to engage government around, the challenges that are faced at a rural and township level, right? It's the infrastructure problem, one, the issue of also cost of data, number two. So even a platform like AI still requires that infrastructure to be existent. So for sure, we can engage and talk about AI, but if one is sitting at a privileged place, it will work for me because I have access to it. I've got a good enough job. I'm running a business. I'm able to have access to that. But even just a basic computer center in a rural or township school doesn't exist. So we now need to start thinking about the building of hubs in our various provinces. We've got 9 provinces. We've got, one of the highest youth unemployment that is sitting, and AI could solve some of these problems. So there seems to be a greater need for urban, middle class, lower class to start talking together, not in different pockets. And I think in that way, we are not sitting in a center, for an example, deriving solutions for the township, and then we believe that we have the right answers for it. I think it will require a collaboration, but I see AI as a partner, as a collaborator. I see AI as a tool. I also see it as a genre in the creative sector. You're starting to see AI films, AI songs. It's a genre. And I think that itself for me still remains the opportunity where some individuals still want to see real human content, real human creative, and then others are also enjoying what technology can also do in order to enhance their creative output. But from a South African perspective, I think there's a real need for government to intervene in communication with what can the telcos do in order to play a role in reduction of data costs, and also some of the big tech companies and how can they support from a machinery perspective in some of these hubs, and also the financial sector in creating platforms that are African-built platforms where people can trade and, and using blockchain technology, to protect things like IP and so forth. We foresee also the legal sector coming on board to ensure these smaller studios and companies that are also protected contractually, because as a business person, you require that. Also, the tax man, what can SARS do to reduce? I mean, if you're a creative or a freelancer, you are taxed like 25%, for whatever, and it can be a very small amount. So the rural township, they're faced with stomach politics, and stomach politics when it comes to creation, it also, creates a stumbling block. But I do remain positive because this even conversation for me is a much greater start to unlocking different mindsets. Because as a business school, when a conversation like this happens, then it starts to really spark an interest from interested parties in how do we solve this problem. And the next, I think, 10 years is where the opportunity lies.
Thank you. That's excellent. No, I mean, it's a good to end on a positive note, and we're unfortunately once again run out of time. But I think that we're starting a conversation about the creative sector, which will continue. We're already planning a webinar in November. Barry and I will now move to the music sector, which is, I can see the parallels. I know I'm an outsider once again, but I see very clear parallels of similar challenges, issues of opportunity, structure of the industry, and so on. And we will continue this conversation, Barry and I, in November to the music industry. I think more questions. People, this is, as I said, this is a place where we start with questions, we end with questions. We're not giving you solid answers. We want you to think about things. We want to provoke you, the audience, to consider the challenges that are faced across the industry and across the continent. So, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Hope to see you again in the next webinar. And I'd like to thank my guests who have taken off their time to spend a number of hours preparing for this, talking to us, and enlightening us. So thank you, everyone, and to my audience. See you soon. See you at the next webinar, first Thursday of every month. Watch this space. Thank you very much. Bye.
The Dunning Africa Center. It's not a place, it's a continent-wide conversation. Join us as we ask the pressing questions facing African business today.